Hello, everyone. In today's lecture, we are going to be moving on to emotional development. So just to get us started, wanted to talk about some essential components to emotions. So just kind of better understanding how we might be interpreting our emotions. So these are the three areas that we might be looking at when we are trying to help children to understand what emotions mean and how we express ourselves. So the first one is physical. So this is our emotional state, how you feel physiologically at any given moment. So that internal or external response within the body that leads to emotions or feelings. So for example, we might have our palms sweating and our heart racing, and then this could indicate to us that we're feeling nervous or anxious. And then our emotional expression through behavioral elements or our reactions and actions that we take based on how we feel, so how we express our emotional state. So if we are feeling excited, we might want to give extra hugs, or we might want to jump up and down. And then cognitively, we experience emotions and interpret the value of our emotions. So based on the thoughts that we form from our experiences, this can create an emotional response or a feeling. So if you have a test coming up or you're going to get ready to go on a trip, you might be worried, or it could also produce excitement. So based on our own experiences, we might interpret that differently, and then this can produce an emotion. Alrighty, so let's talk a little bit about Erikson's theory, and your text does a nice job of explaining Erikson's theory as well as others in the psychoanalytic theories. You can look more in chapter 1 about that, but specifically in our text for the chapter that we're reading, we are looking a bit more into Erikson's eight stages of psychosocial development. So similar to Sigmund Freud, both Erikson and Freud kind of came up with different developmental stages of behavior. So when we look at Erikson's, we see that he's a stage theorist, and he really looked at birth all the way through death, which isn't typically as common in stage theorists. We normally see birth through adolescence, or even infant and toddler through adolescence. And really what he looked at was individuals and how they respond to the demands of society at different stages in our lives. And so if you look on the next slide, you can see a graphic that explains more about the stages in more detail, as well as in your text, and how biological and social areas of our lives are the primary drivers of our psychosocial development, according to Erikson. So the way in which conflicts are resolved kind of determines our ability to learn, interpersonal relationships, and also coping with anxiety. So we show the significance in forming healthy attachments. And what's really important when we're looking at Erikson's theory, you'll see that the attachment piece, so young children all the way through adolescence, and even through, our later ages as adults and through death, we are constantly yearning for attachments, and it's important for us to form healthy attachments early on in our life. And we see that through all of his stages, supportive relationships are key. So starting with stage 1, trust versus mistrust, from birth to 12 to about 18 months. Children need to form that initial relationship, and really babies rely on adults for everything they need for survival. So being fed, being changed, being clothed, being kept from harm, and being provided with shelter, everything that a infant might need during this time of trust versus mistrust stems on that foundation of a supportive relationship. So a secure attachment is going to set a child up for all of the future stages that are to come. And so we also see that through stage 2, autonomy versus shame and doubt starts to come forth. So from around 18 months to 2 years old, this is a really key time for children to have a safe space and for them to work on becoming independent individuals with the support from an adult. And this stage requires a lot more patience from adults. So really allowing children opportunities and that space to be autonomous, and thinking about how we can avoid shame and doubt through our actions, through our words. And it also really comes into play when we're thinking about emotions, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So how do we create autonomous spaces and room for children to grow? And especially at the preschool years, we see children are in this initiative versus guilt stage from about 3 to 5 years old, and some even 2. So, it is dependent on who the child is, but typically we see from 3 to 5 years old that initiative versus guilt stage is our opportunity to allow children to make their own decisions. And your text has a nice quote that I feel is fitting for this. To feel emotionally satisfied, a child must be allowed to explore, to act, and to do. And so that quote embodies that initiative versus guilt. So allowing children to take initiative. And if children are not able to have autonomy from that stage 2, then it's going to be harder for them to form initiative and take initiative once they enter stage 3, because there's already going to be that shame and doubt surrounding them, and then it lingers and continues and builds upon into guilt. And so we want to start with trust, and then once children form trust, then they can go off on their own a little bit and feel autonomous, and then they can take initiative when they have mastered a skill and have purpose in what they're doing. And then as children get to around 6 to 11 years old, we see industry versus inferiority, and children are trying to identify themselves. Who am I by myself in comparison to who am I within a group or within my society? And so we'll talk more about this, but thinking about the role of the adult through all of these stages, and how the forming of attachments, strong bonds, creating relationships that are going to be lasting and going to allow children to come into their own, either through caregivers or parents, whomever is going to be caring for a child. So we really want to think about supportive, warm, and nurturing relationships that are responsive and allow children the opportunity to feel accomplished and come into their own. We want to respect children, and we want to establish trust, build autonomy, encourage children to take initiative, and then this helps children to become purposeful and hardworking and have the I can do it attitude. But when we are meeting them with dismissal and negativity, this tends to create more conflict and tension, and then it does not allow children the opportunity to feel that they have their own abilities and that they're able to do things on their own. And so you'll see also on slide 6 more explanation of that initiative versus guilt. So what that looks like. Again, your text also describes it as well. So this is going to be the audio for slides 4, 5, and 6. So click through as you're watching, as you're listening, or if you might be watching on the video on YouTube. But for 4, 5, and 6, this is going to be the audio. Okay, so now we're going to get into the milestones. So on slides 7, 8, and 9, we're going to be discussing the milestones that are within the foundations that we discussed for your homeworks that you're going to be doing. So first, let's talk about emotional understanding. So this milestone in particular is focused on children's understanding of emotions for themselves, for others. So we're helping children to understand what empathy might look like and how to recognize when somebody is feeling upset or hurt. So what is someone feeling and how is their behavior reflective of what they're feeling? So we talked about on the first slide those different essential components to emotions. So we understand that when someone is jumping up and down or they're giving big hugs, that might mean that they are excited. So throughout the years, children are developing emotional understanding, as you can see, between 36, 48, and 60 months, children are increasing their ability to understand emotions and recognize that emotions can differ within people. So if you've ever seen the movie Inside Out, this is a great example of emotional understanding and the complexity of being able to have a variety of different emotions intertwined in one. So we may be happy and sad at the same time and crying. And typically, when you think of crying, you might only, as a young child, see sadness, when actually we could be crying because we're both happy and sad. So there's different emotional states that we might be in all at once, because human beings are complex individuals with a variety of different emotions. Okay, and the second milestone that we're going to be discussing is our emotional expression. So the ability for children to express themselves in socially appropriate ways. So their understanding of emotions is a key step in being able to express their emotions in socially appropriate ways. And we will also talk a little bit later about what adults do to be able to provide children. So adults can help children to label their emotions, give them different types of words that they might use, because we're not just happy and sad. We might be feeling courageous or proud or strong or encompassed with a lot of different emotions other than just happy and sad. We might be feeling furious or anxious. So many different ways that we might describe our emotions or our feelings. And so adults can help out a lot with showing and telling children ways that we can label and socially acceptable and appropriate ways to express emotions. So another quote that your text has that I liked for emotional expression was, the ability to recognize and acknowledge feelings openly is the soundest way to foster mental health. And I think that this is a great way to think about our emotions, because oftentimes we neglect our mental health, and we're seeing that young children are being screened for mental health concerns earlier and earlier on. And if we were more open and able to support children with their emotional expression, we can help them to foster mental health and give them space to feel safe and secure. Again, going back to that importance of attachment, so forming attachments so that if a child does need to express their emotions, they have somebody that they can go to. And so again, you can see different examples of ways that emotional expression are going to look between 36, 48, and 60 months. Last but not least, for our milestone section, we have emotional regulation. So emotional regulation comes into play when we are thinking about the ability to control our emotions and respond appropriately and effectively to our environment. So again, don't just tell children how to regulate their emotions, show them. And so give them different tools that they can utilize when they are feeling embarrassed. They can go and take some space, or if they're feeling angry or frustrated, give them ways that they can express and regulate their emotions. So we might express our anger through our body language and our facial expressions, and we might need to regulate by having a squeezy ball. So there's many different ways, depending on who the person is, how we might regulate our emotions. And so there's different ways of how we might appropriately express and regulate our emotions taught by our culture and our society. So we think about, what should you do when you feel blank, and you fill in the blank, with what that emotion might be, and giving children those different tools, as I said. So, for 36 months, ask for their blanket before nap time. This might be a way that a child needs to regulate how they're feeling sleepy. And so many different examples between the different months that you can look at here. But really the key with emotional regulation, it stems back to that support, healthy development in other areas such as sense of self, sense of self-esteem, self-competency, self-confidence, and social interactions with others, others, they all stem from emotional regulation. And so we need to be able to have emotional regulation, expression, and understanding to support all other areas of development. On this slide, I wanted to discuss some factors that influence emotional regulation. So first, let's talk about some individual factors. So a big one that we often see come forth is temperament. And so everybody has a different temperament, and you might notice that when you're interacting with a child, whether it is in child care center, home daycare, your own child, for example, even just a sibling, you might notice, we don't always agree or we express ourselves differently. And this could be because you have different temperaments. And so I recommend thinking about the goodness of fit. So if you are a person who gets overwhelmed really easily, or you have sensitivity or sensory concerns related to lights or sounds or uncomfy clothing, and then this causes you to feel more discombobulated. So this was me and still is me. I get overwhelmed if I'm in a room and there's a lot of loud noises. So maybe I am in a meeting, for example, and I have a lot of fluorescent lights above my head, and there's a lot of people talking all at once. And then this creates a more stressful atmosphere and then causes me to have emotional dysregulation. And so I may stutter my words, or I might start sweating even more, become more nervous, have a harder time interacting with others. And so this is my own personal temperament. But for somebody else, it might not bother them at all, and they're perfectly capable of going with the flow, not really being bothered by the stimuli around them. And so we see that children who have difficulty in temperaments related to sensory input might have a harder time in their emotional regulation. And so I want you to just think about, who you are, or, a person in your life, and think about their temperament. And so you can also Google goodness of fit, and this is a great tool that we use in early child care for looking at teachers and children, or even parents and children, and you fill in different bubbles to indicate what your temperament might look like, and then it gives you ideas on how to best support and nurture that relationship, because not everybody is going to have the same initial traits, and we're not always going to mesh well with every single person that we're in the room with, but there's ways to nurture and support a variety of different human beings, and children need that. They need somebody to recognize, okay, we have different ways of responding to the environment, and there's different impacts on the environment, these individual factors. And so we can also consider with temperament developmental stage. So it could be a combination of the two or separate entities. So developmental stages. So we see that children over time, as they age, they become better at regulating their emotions. And so this might be a factor that influences emotional regulation, because we might not understand those milestones as well as we thought we did. And so we might think, okay, a child should be able to do A, B, and C. But then we look at that milestone piece and we see, okay, maybe they are just not at the age yet where they have the ability to control and respond to their environment as appropriately as someone who's a few years older than them. So that could be another individual factor that is impacting or influencing emotional regulation. And then we also have social factors. So we talked a little bit about toxic stress and stressful environments and how ACEs can impact physical development. They can also impact emotional regulation and emotional development. So stress and social environments, the environment in general, it can come into play in all areas of development. And so We might see parental conflicts or chaotic environments or different types of stress or just changes in a child's life that are going to impact their emotional regulation. So if we have parents who are fighting a lot and they have an inability or difficult time with controlling their anger, this could then lead to a child in the home who has difficulty in controlling their anger. Or if there's a lack of routine or inconsistent expectations, the child might have difficulty in moving from place to place or getting where they need to go in the morning, or transitions could be really difficult for them, and they have a hard time regulating what they should be doing now versus what we're going to be doing in 5 minutes. Same with stress. There's positive and negative changes that could happen within a family dynamic, and this could impact the child's emotional regulation. So a new sibling coming into the picture, this could cause a child to feel overwhelmed and they're lacking that connection that they were having consistently with a parent. And so this can lead to children feeling more overwhelmed, more stressed out. They might have a harder time in expressing themselves, or they are showing you that they're emotionally dysregulated, but the appropriate ways that you practice might be retracting a little bit, and mental health could be impacted. So many different factors that might influence children's emotional regulation that we see. And the article below is a great one to look at if you'd like more info on emotional regulation, so feel free to check that one out as well.
It's very important to help children develop their emotional skills, both in expression, understanding, and regulation. So there are 3 basic ways you can help children to get better emotional development skills, and also you can take these 3 ways of working with young children and apply them to social skills and all kinds of other skills, so particularly in that social emotional realm. So they don't just go with emotional development, but these socialization skills are definitely important in that arena in particular. So one way that adults can help children to build their emotional skills is to indirectly socialize them. So children pay attention to the kinds of things that we're doing. They pick up on the ways in which adults around them are expressing, managing, understanding emotions. So it's really important for us to behave in the way that we want children to behave, to be good at expressing our own emotions, to be kind and responsive to the emotions of people around us, to not be disparaging when somebody is feeling something different than we are, to be kind when you see someone who's having a hard time with emotional regulation, because children are looking at us. They're looking at how we're behaving and managing and doing different things in the world, and then they're determining how they should respond in kind. So that's the social referencing piece. So they both imitate us, do what we do, and they also look to us for guidance about how they should be responding in a particular situation. So if you drop your child off at preschool and you look uncomfortable and unhappy and stressed out and like it's not a good place to be, they're going to be watching you and picking up on those emotions that you're expressing, and then in turn they're probably not going to have a very good day because that's the message that they've gotten from you about that particular environment. Another thing that we can do is what's called expectancy communication. So talk with children ahead of time about how different situations might make them feel, strategies that they can use. The link on this page is a great article. It's about a research study done with children to show that children who kind of have a hard time managing things have a hard time kind of in the rest of their lives as well, and gives some great strategies for how to help children build their emotional regulation and emotional development skills. But talking with children, saying, you know, sometimes when we go to new places, we might feel scared. What can we do to feel less scared? Or sometimes when you go to a party and somebody gets something that you wanted, you might feel angry or you might feel jealous. How can we handle that? Or you might be sad when you have to say goodbye to grandma because I know that you really like having her here. So talking ahead of time about what that emotional landscape might look like and how we can manage the feelings that might be brought forth in particular situations. And then we can also directly socialize children. So we can directly teach them skills that will help them to manage their emotions. So sometimes, unfortunately, we scold children. So when they are expressing or feeling a particular emotion, we tell them that's not okay and that they need to not be doing that. Better is to help them develop strategies to appropriately express the emotions that they're feeling. So we all feel angry, but how can we express that in a way that doesn't have us yelling at people or hitting them? What are some other things that we can do instead to manage those big emotions? So on the last slide, in a couple slides from now, we're going to talk about Ruler, which is a great teaching tool that's often used in early childhood classrooms that teaches children those emotional development skills that might be useful to them, and also goes along with just generally teaching them emotional intelligence skills. You can also see that there's the graphic to the right of this slide, just some nice, basic, simple tips to be able to follow. So being calm yourself, making sure that you're offering children predictable routines, clear boundaries, knowing lots of feeling words and using them and helping children to use them. So some good tips overall to help children with their emotional development and regulation.
Okay, so really quickly, I just wanted to share a little bit of information about emotional intelligence. So as you can see here, emotional intelligence is defined by one's ability to identify, assess, and control our emotions and the emotions of others, as well as that of groups. So really going back to those key milestones that we were discussing of emotional understanding, expression, and regulation, and really what emotional understanding is talking about that cognitive component of emotions combined with the emotional expression and regulation, so those behavioral components. So we also talked about the different essential components of emotions and how our behavior and our cognitive areas of our brains and bodies are important. So what emotions mean and our ability to express them. And we also see that children who have higher emotional intelligence, so the ability to identify and assess and control their emotions, so that understanding, expressing, and regulating of emotions, they are better able to pay attention, be more engaged in school, have more positive relationships. So again, all areas of development are positively impacted and benefit from children having strong emotional intelligence. And this supports their ability to regulate their behaviors and have grades that are more successful. And so just in the long run, being able to have the ability to control our emotions, to understand our emotions, to express ourselves, it supports us and sets us up for success in all other areas in our lives. On this slide and our final slide for our lecture, we are going to discuss the tool called Ruler, and this is a great follow-up from the previous slide of emotional intelligence, where we discussed how children who have higher emotional intelligence are better able to be supported in relationships, they're more empathetic, they're doing more positively in school, such as being able to regulate their behaviors, earning higher grades, and such. And so we can see here that the term ruler is broken up into different ways on supporting children's ability to understand, express, and regulate their emotions. And so there are these different steps that a child could take, and they're taught in order to increase their emotional intelligence. So the first one is that recognizing emotions in oneself or others. So being able to recognize, okay, this is the emotion that I'm having. This is how I'm feeling right now, or this is how someone else is feeling. And then that you understanding the causes and consequences of emotions. So that why piece, why am I feeling this way? And labeling emotions accurately. So I kind of discussed earlier how we have complex emotions, and we're not just happy or sad. We have different types of descriptive language that we can use to label our emotions accurately, because you might be crying and feeling alone, but you might not be sad. You might be feeling discombobulated or distressed, or you might be feeling lonely. So lonely could look different than feeling sadness, or demoralized or embarrassed. That could look different than sadness. Or if you are ecstatic or you're astonished, that could be different than happiness, right? So there's many different ways that we might label our emotions, and having accurate ways to label our emotions can help us to better understand the causes and also better able to recognize. So I might misinterpret someone's body language and label them inaccurately when I'm trying to recognize. So all of these pieces fit in nicely together, and then expressing emotions in ways that are appropriate for the time, place, and culture. So there's different ways that we might express our emotions in different settings with different people, depending on what the emotion is, and then finally regulating our emotions. So we are expressing them, but we also need to think about, how do I regulate this big feeling that I'm having right now? And so here's just another article for you to talk about the mood meter, which I'm going to get into more on the next slide. So it's a supportive chart that children can use to identify their feelings using different labels and different colors. So again, like I said, on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so on this slide, this is just an extension of the previous one, talking about the preschool ruler, specifically looking at that mood meter. So as you can see, we have 4 different colors in the different quadrants, and we have a variety of different words. So I talked about how we might not be feeling sad, but maybe we're feeling tired or depressed, or we're not feeling calm. We might be feeling open-minded or comfortable. So different ways that we can label our emotions. And here's some questions I was kind of leading into with that term ruler, in how we might better address where we fit on the mood meter. And so when you're going through and answering and following the steps of ruler, it can help you to better pinpoint, okay, what is that emotion, that feeling that I'm having? Because sometimes if we're not going through these steps, we're uncertain of where we lie. And then if we don't recognize that first step, how am I feeling? If we're not able to recognize, it's going to be harder for us to label, express, and regulate. So first we have to recognize, all right, I'm having some sort of feeling right now, because there's a variety of different feelings, variety of different emotions, right? Remember our inside out. We are complex human beings. And so we have to think, okay, how am I feeling? And then we have to think about, okay, what does this mean? I have to better understand myself and who I am. Think about those different factors that are influencing our own personal emotions. So my temperament, my understanding what happened that led me to feel this way, it could be related to my own personal temperament. It could be related to my developmental stage. It could be my social environment. So there might be something that is stressful that's happening to me, and this has led me to feel worried or angry or pumped up or proud. So I have to think, how am I feeling? And then what happened? Why am I feeling this way? And then once I can better recognize why I'm feeling a certain way, I can label it. And so I might put my picture or point to a color or word on this chart, and I can best describe how I'm feeling. In my home, I actually have my own version of a mood meter, you could say. And so it's a little magnet on my fridge, and it has different emotions, and you can move a open magnet piece onto the different emotions depending on what you're feeling that day. And so I try to at least once a week change it up, because I'm not always feeling the same. And so I might come home and I've had a long, tiring day, and so I want to change to the tired section. Or if I had a rejuvenating day and I got to relax, I might put the peaceful one. So I have now labeled how I'm feeling, whether it's in a word or a color. It could be a picture. So it depends on who you are. Maybe words and colors don't describe the way that you're feeling best. Maybe it's a photo. So maybe you have different photos of nature, or you have different cartoons that you might feel that you connect with best. So it can be whatever you want, but the initial and original idea behind the mood meter is this color and word chart that we have going on. And then let's think about now we've labeled, we've better understood ourselves, and we've recognized what's going on. Now I can think about, okay, how do I express myself? Because depending on where I fall with on this mood meter, my expression might look different. It could look the same, but it might look different, and that's okay too. And so I think, how can I express myself appropriately? What am I feeling for this time and this place? So if I am feeling tired and I'm at work, do I need to take a quick, drink of water because maybe I'm in a meeting and I'm not able to go step out and take a nap? Do I need to take some deep breaths? So what do I need to do to help myself? Sometimes we might need to have a little snack to help us to feel a bit more energized. So what is an appropriate way that I can express myself? Do I need to use certain words? And so we think about what we need to do. Do I need to talk to someone? Do I need quiet time? And then how do I regulate myself? So what can I do to maintain my feeling or shift my feeling? So if I need to get less tired, I kind of was talking about express and regulate at the same time with those examples I was giving, because oftentimes we're expressing and regulating ourselves at the same moment. So how I express myself appropriately for that time or place at work, if I'm tired, I might be trying to stay focused as best I can, or if I'm feeling mad and I am having a conversation, I might need to say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit frustrated right now, and so I might not respond right away. And so then I might say, to help me to use kind words, I'm going to take some deep breaths, or I might walk away and we can talk again. So different ways that we might express or regulate depending on that feeling or emotion that we're having. And so there's 2 great videos here that talk about the mood meter. And the first one is specifically related to the preschool ruler, the original concept and idea behind it. And then the second one is actually a infant and toddler caregiver using the ruler tool to help infants and toddlers to go through these 5 steps, because oftentimes our young children might not be able to utilize, recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate all on their own. They need the support. They need an adult who already knows how to recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate to help them. And so that goes and wraps us up with that initial thought that we were having of that attachment, securing that trust. Supportive relationships are key. And that goes for any age, preschoolers, infants and toddlers, middle schoolers, young adolescents, adults. Having somebody to support you when you're having a big feeling or emotion can be a great way for you to tune in, recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate, because sometimes we're having such a big emotion or feeling that we might need the support from someone else. So whether you're able to use the mood meter, you're able to talk to someone, you can write it down. I mean, that's part of why we have therapy, right? It's a way for us to keep in touch with our ruler method. And so feel free to check out these videos. It's a great wrap up for you to better understand what this ruler and mood meter are for. And I hope you have a wonderful day or evening whenever you're watching this. And I will talk to you in our next lecture. Bye, everyone. Thank you.